Yeah, you are asking something?
Why do these plants have been depend on the amount of sunlight? If you provide more sunlight, it should grow more.
Yeah, they will grow. See, that's what I said. There is no problem in growth. But flowering, that is a concept that is dependent on light. They are sensitive to the amount of light they receive. Okay. See, buds, if you go to see, are very tender. Okay. So, in case of short day plants, the buds are tender. They do not require that much amount of light. Okay. Small amount of light is enough for them to flower. Okay. Excess. See, किसी भी चीज को तुम excess ज़्यादा दो, it will not work to its potential, right? That ways. See, if something, okay, can take this much amount of heat, okay, and is working best at that much amount of heat, if you give excess heat, won't it not work to its potential? Same way, these are sensitive to the amount of light they receive for only in terms of flowering, not in terms of growth. Growth is happening, that is happening in the critical photo period, right? Fine. The buds require only that much time, only that much light. When they receive, they will flower. That is the phenomenon. Okay, getting? So we are coming to short day plants, right? They are also known as night plants. Now, very interesting phenomenon that's seen is that in these short day plants, okay, during the night time, even if they gave a flash of light or a small period of artificial light, okay, the whole cycle of flowering was disturbed. They were not flowering at the appropriate time. Yes, plants can grow in artificial light. They can. See, same thing, na? They can grow in artificial light depending on the amount of time you give that artificial light. You have to give that artificial light for the same amount of time as they otherwise would get light in natural. Source of the light is not important. Bulbs, in the sense, there are some special bulbs known as incandescent bulbs. They give the same kind of heat that they would otherwise get in sunlight. Okay, not under like tube light, normal tube light, no, they won't grow. Okay, there are special kind of bulbs known as incandescent bulbs. Okay. Yeah, so that was about short day. I was saying that even if they were in the night, okay, even if they were exposed to a brief amount of light, okay, for some time, like maybe even for half an hour, the whole cycle was disturbed. So that's how the scientists came to the conclusion that for flowering, it is very important that the amount of light is precise. Okay, like in the night they gave, when it's supposed to be completely dark, they gave the plant around half an hour of light. What happened? The whole cycle was disturbed. Okay, that was in case of short day plants. Extremely sensitive to the amount of light and the timing of light. Okay, then we come to long day plants. Long day plants are those, okay, which will flower, okay, when the light available to them is more than the critical period. That means obviously during summer, yeah, we also known as summer plants. And these, okay, when in the night, that means they require longer days and shorter nights for flowering. And in the night when they expose the plant, okay, to certain amount of light, it remained unaffected. Okay, that means long day plants are not sensitive, not extremely sensitive to the period of light. Because anyway they are requiring longer day. Right, fine. Then came day neutral plants. Day neutral plants are those which are not affected by the time of light, the period of light. Okay, like throughout the critical photo period they can flower, like hibiscus. It flowers throughout the year. One cycle over, the other cycle starts.
Critical photo period in the sense for hibiscus, if continuously keep on giving light,
it will still grow. Continuously in the sense, if you are saying 24 hours, no, there will come a time, see, the plant also needs to rest. Okay, night is the time when the rate of photosynthesis is very less. Day is the time when rate of photosynthesis is maximum. If you keep on giving it light, it's going to get confused that when is it getting time to rest. Photosynthesis, it keeps on exerting itself, keeps on undergoing photosynthesis. Somewhere or the other, its body mechanism will shut down, right? See, plant body is very similar to our body. It has its own limitations. Okay, fine. So photoperiodism got day neutral, etc. Okay. Now coming to they can during the day they require light. See, they cannot flower in the night. Okay, except one 4 o'clock plant. Okay, and there's one plant known as Brahma Kamal, if you all have heard of it. It flowers only at 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay, that's a very rare case where they can flower without light. But plants for flowering, they usually require light. When I said day neutral, What I meant is that the duration of the light, they are not sensitive to the duration of the light, like day neutral, like short day or long day. Okay, they are not specific for that, or they are not sensitive to the duration. That's why they can flower in any season, right? But short day, long day, they can flower only in winter or in summer.
Okay. Even the same species but different plants, they can have different schedule.
Yeah, there are species of plants wherein one species flowers during the winter and the other species flowers during summer. Okay, there are species of plants like that. For example is rye plant, not apna rye. Okay, rye, rye plant. Okay, there's a variety of it. Okay, known as Petcus rye. Okay, now this plant has two varieties. Okay, one which flowers during springtime. Okay, and one which flowers during winter time. Okay, so some plants have the mechanism that they require shorter days while others have longer days. Okay. Okay, now coming to another important concept of another hormone known as florigen. Okay. Florigen, as the name suggests, something related to flowers. Okay. Now what it is seen in plants, okay, is that when they receive the appropriate amount of light, in case of short day and long day, in case of day neutral, they just have to receive light. Okay. Plants synthesize a hormone known as florigen. This causes flowering. Okay.
Present scenario, the short day plants in that case should not grow because the days are much more long, even in winter.
I didn't get you.
Nowadays even the days are becoming longer, right, in winter.
Yeah, days are becoming longer.
Still short day plants will grow.
Yeah, they will grow. Flowering will get delayed. Flowering will get delayed. There will be some few days wherein the day will be still short as it was before. Those are the days it will flower. You're getting? See, nowadays if you see, there are a lot of reports wherein flowering plants are getting disturbed. Yeah, their cycle does get disturbed when there are drastic changes in the environment. In case of drought, continuous sunlight and no waterfall also. You see plants wither, they die away. Right, physiological conditions occur. When we are explaining you this, we are taking in terms all the appropriate conditions present. Okay. Yeah, so I was talking about florigen. When plants are exposed to the normal amount of light, okay, which is required for flowering, okay, they will produce a hormone called as florigen. Okay, florigen is the one which causes buds to open up and flower. Okay. Now, what they saw was that when researchers, okay, if a plant, okay, is not exposed to proper photoperiod, okay, that means it will not be able to flower, okay, but then when it is grafted onto another plant, okay, which has been exposed to a proper photoperiod, then this part of the plant which was actually not exposed to proper photoperiod, it was flowering. That means that's how they came to the point that there is something internally synthesized which is helping. As in, consider I kept two rose plants, okay, one rose plant, okay, I gave it proper photoperiod as required, okay, another rose plant I did not give it, I kept it in dark maybe, okay, I did not give it the amount of light or sunlight it requires. Then what I did was that I cut a part of this rose plant, okay, and I tied it on to this other rose plant, grafted it along with the other rose plant, okay, which was receiving proper photoperiod. Florigen which was produced in the rose plant will be transferred to this part also. That's why it was flowering. Okay, so basically the whole concept behind this appropriate or sensitivity to light is the production of florigen. Only when it gets appropriate amount of light, it will produce florigen, and that's when flowering will occur. Concept clear of flowering? Yeah, any more doubts? Okay. Now, there's another phenomenon that occurs within flowering plants, okay, known as vernalization. This is seen in winter plants. In winter plants, what it is seen is that in addition to proper photo period, okay, it also requires some for the process of flowering, it requires temperatures lower than that of the normal. That's when it flowers. As in, what did they see is that when researchers, okay, put short day plants in the proper amount of light, okay, but they gave it heat, okay, as in they made the temperature higher, the plant was not able to flower. So that's when they came to the term that they need to have temperatures lower along with proper photo period, okay, they need to have lower temperatures coupled, okay, then only they would flower, and this phenomenon is termed as vernalization, okay, getting. Now this was done by an Indian scientist known as Chaurad in 1960, okay. Now this process of vernalization, okay, was also seen in and was also demonstrated in annual and biennial plants. What are annual plants? Which complete their cycle 1 year, okay, whereas biennial plants in 2 years. So what they saw was that flowering plants which are biennials required prolonged period of lower temperatures, then the buds would be ready to flower. That means enough amount of floration would be produced only after this. So what they did was that for these biennial plants, okay, after the first period, okay, of winter, then comes summer. What they did was they took the plant and put it in conditions which were similar to winter again. They saw that plants were flowering. Within 1 year the plants flowered. Okay, so then they came to know that, you know, photo period is important for winter plants or short day plants. Okay, clear? Fine. Then there is something known as devernalization, that is the reverse of vernalization, when plants, okay, along with photo period require higher temperatures. This is seen in very few plants. Okay, that's all. So we are done with this chapter. Okay. Now we are going to come to plant-water relations. Okay, what do you understand by the word? Relation between the plant body and water, and how it takes water from its surrounding. Okay, so basically all the different activities in which water is involved and are considered together as plant-water relations. Okay, all the different activities of the plant in which water is involved is considered as plant-water relations. Okay, now let's see the main source of water for plants. Okay, first thing, okay, hygroscopic water. What does the word hygroscopic mean? See, if this is a plant body, okay, and these are the roots, okay, some amount of water will be always present around the roots because the roots tightly hold water, right? We've studied this before, right? So this water which is present around the roots, okay, which is tightly held by the roots of the plant, is known as hygroscopic water. It is a source of water. Whenever the plant wants it, takes it up, right? Water comes to the root transfers it, okay, to the stem, xylem, phloem, sorry, only xylem. Okay, fine. Then combined water. Okay, combined water is the water which is present in the plant body in conjugation with various compounds like your aluminium, silicon, oxides of silicon, oxides of aluminium. Okay, so conjugated with compounds and can be dissociated from the compounds whenever the plant is in need of water. Okay, getting? Fine. Then there is third source of water, that is due to the law of gravity, there is water always seeping into the soil, right? Whatever water falls on the surface of the ground is seeped into the soil, right? Then it reaches the water table. So on this process, okay, when it's reaching the water table and everything, roots will be collecting that. So gravitational water is also a source of water. Okay, fine. Then capillary water, as in between soil particles, okay, in between soil particles there is small amount of water, okay, which will be on the surface of this, okay, or on the surface of the stem at times, okay, or on the surface of the leaf, okay, when it falls, which will be sucked in by the plant eventually, sucking by capillary motion. So capillary water, okay. See, source of water, don't confuse it with the direct source like rainfall. All that is direct source of water. We're talking about the immediate source from where it takes in the water, okay. That's how you classify them as hygroscopic water, combined water, gravitational water, capillary water, okay. Anything confusing? Okay. Now the process, okay, see, plants can obtain water, okay, from any of these, okay, but there are some basic processes that are there, okay, or that occur while the plant is taking in water, okay. First one is imbibition. Then second one is absorption, diffusion, okay. Third is, very good, osmosis, okay. Now imbibition is when water is absorbed, okay, absorbed by hydrophilic compounds present in the plant, okay. Like I was telling, silicon oxides, aluminium oxides, they absorb the water on their surface, they don't form compounds. So when the plant needs, they can easily dissociate from the compound, okay. That is the process known as imbibition, okay. Now due to this imbibition, these compounds show swelling and subsequent swelling in that region, okay. Like some compounds present in the roots, then the roots show swelling when they take in lots of water because the compounds show swelling, okay, fine. Like sometimes compounds are present in the root hair, okay, fine. The root hair, these compounds absorb, okay, or imbibe, okay. Then the root, whenever the plant requires, the root hair, the water and the compound splits up, okay. Then the water passes from the root hair to the root, from the root to the main plant body, okay. Now the second is diffusion. Diffusion, I think I've explained before, it's very simple. From higher to lower, as in if the xylem, okay, the main xylem, vessel in the stem, okay, if it contains water and the leaf has already transpired enough amount of water, then it will signal or it will take in water from the stem. That is diffusion, simple, from higher concentration to lower concentration, okay. The pressure with which the water, or any gas also for the matter of fact, okay, the pressure with which that water or gas goes from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration, that pressure is termed as diffusion pressure, okay. Looks like a simple term right now, but its significance we will come to later on, okay. Now diffusion pressure is the cause of diffusion, okay, and not a result of diffusion. When there is diffusion pressure, okay, then water will flow, okay, getting?
Yeah.
Then is osmosis. What is osmosis? When water, okay, travels from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration, that is known as osmosis. Occurs when the concentration of solutes is differential. And when the cell is present in a hypotonic surrounding, it will take in water, it will swell. When the when the cell is present in a hypertonic surrounding, will give away water, shrink. Okay. Now with reference to osmosis, you have endosmosis and exosmosis. Okay. Endosmosis when water is taken in, exosmosis when water is given away. Okay. Now we come to another term, okay, known as plasmolysis. Can anyone predict what this means? What is plasmolysis? Lysis, that means breakdown of something. Breakdown of what? See, what happens is, like, consider a plant cell, okay? This is a cell wall, okay? I am drawing the cell wall thick enough, okay? Now if the surrounding region, okay, has higher concentration, there will be continuous exosmosis, okay? Continuous flow of water outside the cell, okay? Eventually what will happen, okay, the cell wall, okay, is non-living structure, okay, it will remain as it is. But why I have drawn this like this, okay, is that your cell contents, the protoplasm of the cell will start shrinking because of loss of water. It will all come and accumulate at one side in the end. Okay, this condition is known as your plasmolyzed cell. Okay, fine.
Outside is the high concentration of water, right?
Higher concentration solutes also could be, okay, or higher concentration of water also, okay, any one of them. Fine. Then, okay, we come to the term osmotic pressure. Okay. Now coming to osmotic pressure. Osmotic pressure is that quantity or that measurement in a cell, okay, or in a plant cell, which is directly proportional to the concentration of solute. Okay, as in, if pure water, okay, pure water has an osmotic pressure equal to 0, okay, but if in the water, as and when solutes or the amount of solute is increased, your osmotic pressure increases. Okay, fine, getting? Okay, now basically osmotic pressure, okay, is the pressure of a solution, okay, or the pressure which must be applied, okay, so as to prevent the entry of solvent due to osmosis. As in, you're getting, understanding? This is the cell, okay. Osmotic pressure of the surrounding, okay, is the amount of pressure that must be applied so as to prevent it from going inside or prevent osmosis from occurring. Okay, fine. That was osmotic pressure. Then there's another term known as turgor pressure, okay, and then a third term known as wall pressure. Okay, turgor pressure. Okay, turgor pressure is when the plant cell undergoes endosmosis, okay, and it absorbs water, then the pressure that develops within the cell, okay, is known as turgor pressure. Okay, fine. That means, okay, when osmotic pressure increases, okay, of the surrounding solution, turgor pressure increases inside,
Yeah. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Concept clear? Okay. Now, apart from turgor pressure, there is something known as wall pressure. Okay. When turgor pressure increases, the cell becomes more and more extended because of imbibing more and more or absorbing more and more water. Okay. Because of that, the cell wall will also start extending. Now, the tension or the pressure in that cell wall is known as wall pressure.
So the difference in turgor.
Turgor is inside the cell, inside the plasma membrane. Wall pressure is only your cell wall. Turgor pressure, wall pressure. Getting?
Yeah.
Yeah? Now, in a fully turgid cell, as in completely turgid cell, when it cannot absorb any more water, your turgor pressure will be equal to wall pressure. Okay? Fine? Now, coming to another term. Diffusion pressure deficit. Okay? What was diffusion pressure?
The pressure.
The pressure caused or the pressure required for it to flow from higher to lower. Yeah? Okay? Now, the diffusion pressure, okay, of pure water. If pure water has to flow from a region of higher concentration to lower concentration, okay, the diffusion pressure of that, okay, is 1, 2, 3, 6 atmospheres. Okay, atmospheres is understood?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if some solute is dissolved, okay, then the amount of pressure that is required will be less,
Yeah.
right? So the diffusion pressure will decrease as compared to that of pure water.
Yeah.
If some solvent is dissolved in the water, in pure water,
Yes.
okay. So this difference, okay. Now supposing I take solvent water, okay. The difference between pure water and solvent water is termed as diffusion pressure deficit.
Okay.
Okay? Clear?
Yeah.
Okay? Now, irrespective of that pressure, okay, of now supposing you have your solvent water, okay, and then you have pure water, okay. Now, if you apply same pressure or with the same, you adjust them in such a way that both flow with the same pressure, okay, that means you make up for the diffusion pressure deficit, okay, then your diffusion pressure deficit, okay, will be equal to your osmotic pressure. Yeah? Understanding? Okay. That means as the cell absorbs more and more water, the cell, I'm not talking about the surrounding right now, as the cell absorbs more and more water, the turgor pressure of the cell increases, but the osmotic pressure of the cell decreases. Okay? When a cell is fully turgid, the osmotic pressure will become equal to the turgor pressure. Okay? Diffusion pressure deficit becomes 0. Okay? So, diffusion pressure deficit can also be said equal to osmotic pressure minus turgor pressure.
Yeah.
Fine? Clear? So this was the concept, okay, of turgor pressure, osmotic pressure, diffusion pressure deficit. All these are used in measurements, okay, when we are taking the amount of water or the amount of nutrients, okay, all this. Now, now we'll come to the actual mechanism of how water is transported, okay, or how there is the movement of water, okay, from root hair to the stem. Okay, fine. As in considering water is taken up from the soil. Okay. Who remembers when we studied the structure of root, there were 4 regions we came to. We did something like this. Yeah, there were 4 regions. Okay, at least tell me what was the lowermost region? Root cap. Very good. Okay, then just above the root cap, yes, okay, zone of cell division. Okay, above it was, what happened to the cells once they came to maturity? Zone of elongation. Cells were enlarging in length. Okay, and there was zone of and then there were root hairs. Remember? Okay. Now we are coming, okay, to the structure of a root hair, a single root hair. Okay, fine. Now consider this region. Okay, just one single part. Okay, remember root hairs were unicellular, right? Okay, okay. Now it has a cell wall. Okay, then cytoplasm. Okay, it has a very constricted nucleus which is at one end. Okay, nucleus. Okay, now what happens? Okay, I'll read this portion out to you, the whole process. Okay, the epiblemma or the epidermal cells, okay, of the root in each region of absorption produce your root hairs. Okay, each root hair is an elongated cell, okay, which has a nucleus constricted at one end. Okay, the cell wall of the root hair, the cell wall is made up of pectic compounds. Okay, in addition with cellulose. Okay, now these, okay, are strongly hydrophilic in nature. So it is these compounds, okay, which will absorb water or imbibe water. Basically they are the ones which imbibe water, they don't absorb water. Okay, water is deposited on the, water droplets are deposited on the this of these compounds, on the surface of these compounds. Okay, now these compounds, okay, then when there is pressure in the root, pressure is developed, these compounds dissociate, water enters the cytoplasm, more water taken from the surrounding. Okay, clear? The cell wall is freely permeable to both solutes and water. Next to the cell wall is your plasma membrane. Okay. Now within this, okay, within the cell, near its periphery, okay, there will also be another large vacuole. Okay. So all the water, okay, when there is no pressure, okay, all the water will be directed to this vacuole.
Yeah.
Okay. From this vacuole, it will be taken in by the root, okay, or the zone of absorption. Again, this vacuole causes the pressure in these cells of the plasma of the cell wall. Okay, the cells of the cell wall then cause their compounds to imbibe water. Again, the process continues. Okay, you're getting the process. Pectic compounds in the cell wall, they imbibe water. Okay, they pass it on to the vacuole. When pressure is created, vacuole transports the water. Again, the vacuole further again puts pressure on your cells of your cell wall. Okay, getting clear? Okay. Now, once the water has entered the root, okay, in the zone of absorption, there are two pathways it takes. Okay, apoplast pathway and symplast pathway. Okay, two methods it takes to reach to the xylem, from where water will be conducted to the rest of the plant body. Okay. Now apoplast pathway. Here the movement of water takes place simply from cell to cell. Okay. As in there are many cells over here. Okay. One cell to the other cell, this cell to this cell. Slow process, this is relatively slow process. Okay. Cell to cell, cell to cell. Then supposing from here the stem starts. Okay. Then from here, then here, then eventually it reaches your xylem, which is right in the center. Okay, this is your apoplast pathway. Okay, then comes your second type, that is your symplast pathway. Okay, now what happens in the symplast pathway? Apoplast, simple, intercellular, transfer of water, okay, symplast pathway. Remember when we were studying about plant cells, initially we studied something known as plasmodesmata.
Yeah.
Where was the plasmodesmata found? The middle lamellae, the cell wall had 3 layers. The middle lamellae of 2 adjacent cells, okay, when they were connected to each other, the junction was known as plasmodesmata. Okay. Now symplast is basically when water is passed through this, okay, through these connections, plasmodesmata. Faster way, okay, because the cell doesn't have to travel the width of the water doesn't have to travel the width of the entire cell. Okay, fine. Here water moves through the membranes of the cell, okay, and the whole network, okay, like if this is the cell, cell to cell to cell, okay. This whole network that is formed, that is known as your symplast. Okay, fine. Now this symplast pathway is essential, okay, when the water has to pass through cells, okay, which have Casparian thickenings. Now we studied about Casparian thickenings. If water has to be passed exclusively from cell to cell, what will happen is that, if consider these are cells which have Casparian thickenings, okay. Now these Casparian thickenings is basically a waxy layer, okay, it will not allow water to pass through. Okay, so that's when your water will start taking your symplastic pathway, passed through plasmodesmata. Okay, eventually the whole aim is that water from your root, it passes on to your epidermis, okay, epidermis into your inner cortex layer to your medullary rays, okay, eventually it has to enter your xylem, okay, all in the lower part of your plant I'm talking about, okay. From the xylem the water has to be available throughout your plant body, okay. So get it, apoplastic and symplastic pathway. Even though water is transferred to the apoplastic pathway, eventually when it comes to cells which have Casparian thickenings, it has to follow the symplastic pathway, okay, fine. Now mechanism of water absorption, okay. This we have done before, so I want you to tell me active absorption, passive absorption, okay. What is active absorption? Active and passive both are types of osmosis. So there is no this of higher to lower, it's always lower to higher. Energy, right? And passive according to the gradient, okay. Now you remembering, okay. So that's the whole concept of active and passive absorption, nothing more, okay. Okay, now we learned, okay, the different mechanisms that are involved in water absorption, okay. That was imbibition, diffusion, okay. Then we also learned about how water is transferred from cell to cell, right. Now what we are coming to is theories, okay, of water translocation. There are two theories, okay. A, root pressure theory. Then there is cohesion tension theory. Okay, and the last one is transpiration pull. Okay, the names of all these theories suggest what we are talking about, or the mechanism we are talking about. What we have to study is the objections that were raised, okay, to each of the theories. Okay, first one is root pressure theory. Okay, this was given by Stephen Hales, okay, in 1727. Okay, fine, that was very long back. Now what this guy said is that plants absorb large quantities of water, okay, from the soil by osmosis, okay, and there's a constant hydrostatic pressure that is developed, okay, within the plant body, okay, because of which root pressure is developed and root keeps on absorbing water. Okay, what he found out was that if a plant, okay, with roots and everything, okay, was cut at the base, okay, there was continuous flow of water, okay, for quite some time there was continuous flow of water from the plant body, okay. So he said that's why, and this process he termed as bleeding or exudation, okay, it was bleeding water, okay. So that's what he said, that there's this continuous pressure because of which lots of water keeps on being pulled up irrespective of whether the plant requires it or no, okay, irrespective of whether the plant requires it or no, the body or the stem of the plant keeps on absorbing. Okay, now two objections that were raised to this is that, first thing, okay, this can be explained in case of shrubs, okay, and plants. What about trees which are like 20 meters in height? Okay, continuous pressure, if you keep on saying that, how much water is it going to take from the soil? Is it possible that much water is there in the soil? Okay, so not explainable for trees. Okay. Okay, and what he meant by saying is that roots, okay, are the whole and sole absorbers of water, and they will transfer the water. But if you cut a plant, okay, like flowers, okay, when you get flowers with the stem, and if you put them in water, don't they absorb water? So in the absence of root also, aren't they absorbing water? So he couldn't explain the pull or the pressure, because see, if there is pressure being developed throughout the plant body, and if this is cut, then the pressure should drop. And once the pressure is destroyed or dropped, how is it able to take in again? How is the pressure being built up again? Right? So, could not explain. The absorption in absence of roots. Okay. Fine. This was your root pressure theory. Okay. Then another thing what people found out is that this exudation of water that he was seeing when he cut off the plant, okay, from the base, is much lower, or the process in which the rate at which the water is lost through this exudation is much lower than the transpiration rate. Okay, so what it means saying is that normally also when the plant is normal living, it is losing more water than the amount of water that is coming out through exudation. So what he meant to say, that the pressure being developed and everything, and the water that was flowing out was a result of the pressure being disturbed, is not true. Okay, because otherwise also the rate of transpiration is more than the amount of water that was exuded. Okay, so could not support transpiration. Okay, fine. Now came your capillarity theory or capillary theory, you call it any of them. Okay, what is capillary mechanism, do you know? What if you keep a thin opening on the surface of a water, okay, water will attempt to enter that capillary. Blotting paper,
Yes, blotting paper.
you put it on the surface of ink, isn't it taking in? Okay, just because it has space and pores, it's taking in. Capillary theory. Okay, so now this was given by, I don't know how you pronounce this guy's name, but I would pronounce it as Boehm. Okay, this was given by Boehm in 1809. Okay, now what he said was that the theory or the ascent of sap or water along with nutrients is known as sap. Okay, the ascent of sap or water in the plants is due to capillarity. Okay, wherever it sees an opening, it will force itself to go there. Okay, not wrong completely if you go to see, because transpiration pull is also the same thing, right? Okay, now according to this guy, your according to this theory, your tracheids and your vessels in your xylem behave like capillary tubes. Wherever they see water, they take in. Okay, they take it in. Okay, now what objections were raised to his theory, okay, to this capillary theory? The first thing, the distance to which water can rise, okay, is very much limited, as the average diameter of the xylem vessels is quite large. Okay, as in if I isolated the xylem vessel and I put it in water, the amount of water that was flowing, okay, is much less than the diameter. Capillary matlab it fills in the entire diameter. That case, so much of water should be taken in. Okay, because we remember when we studied the structure, the xylem bundle was thick enough. Remember, with all the vessels, tracheids and everything, your xylem bundle was thick enough. So the amount or the height to which water is raised because of this capillary action, if it is so, is very much limited compared to the diameter of the xylem vessels. Okay, that was the first thing. Okay, Now for capillary, the main thing is that the tube should be open at both ends. Okay, over here, where are the xylem vessels open at both ends? Eventually come to a seal. Okay, eventually the last part of your plant is your root tip, sealed. Root tip I'm saying, sorry, leaf tip, sealed. Okay, so capillary cannot occur because for capillary both ends should be open. When you place a tube or a capillary tube, your both ends are open, right? Okay. Now, another principle of capillarity, okay, is that height to which the water rises, okay, is inversely proportional to the diameter. As in, lesser the diameter, more the water rises. But in case of plants, nothing like that is seen. Okay. And the main important thing, for capillarity to occur, okay, or for capillary action to occur, the xylem vessels should be in direct contact with water. But the first thing we saw is that water is taken in by the root hairs, it's transferred, then transferred from your epiblema right to your mid or internal xylem. Okay, so capillary anyway is denied, this theory anyway is denied, not supported. Okay, then came your cohesion tension theory. Okay, this was given by Dickson, okay, and Joly in 1894. Okay, see, whenever terms and your dates are very important in science, okay, especially when you are doing this. But when we are talking about certain theories, it is very important to know who gave them and to remember who gave them. Okay, even if you don't remember who discovered something or who discovered this phenomenon, but certain theory is attributed to a person, right? So you're supposed to be remembering who gave the theory. Okay. There is no concession actually. You should remember the dates also. Okay. So, cohesion tension theory. What is cohesion? Cohesion is accumulation, attraction between similar molecules or similar cells in case of plants. Okay. So, what Dickson and Joly said is that water molecules, okay, are similar, so they have attraction towards themselves. So, as in, what they went to say, okay, probably is that if this is the plant body, okay, water molecules here, okay, this will attract this will attract this, eventually will cause the upward pull of water. Okay, fine. But, okay, this was cohesion of water molecules, okay. Then there was something known as, then they gave a second part to their own theory known as adhesion. Okay, if cohesion is attraction between two similar molecules, adhesion is the attraction between two dissimilar molecules. Okay, so what he said is that the force of attraction between water and lignified cell wall of the xylem, okay, is the reason why water is contained within the xylem and is transported. As in, there is adhesion between your cell wall of xylem and your water molecule. Same time, simultaneously, there is cohesion between your water molecules. That is why they are transmuted exclusively to the xylem and they remain within the xylem. Okay? Getting? Now, this theory, okay, is widely accepted still. Okay? Because it does make sense if you go to see. Attraction between similar molecules, adhesion between these two, and that's why it remains within. Okay? But along with this, there is another concept, okay, which come in tandem. Okay, what people now believe, okay, or what scientists now believe, that is along with cohesion tension theory, there is also certain effect of transpiration pull. Transpiration pull, easy enough that when water is lost out from the leaf, okay, has to compensate for the pressure, so it starts pulling water available, okay, from your veins to venulets to veins to your midrib to eventually pulling off water from the xylem. So both together act and that's how water is transported to the different parts of the body, plant body. Okay, fine. Okay, let's see the mechanism of transpiration. Okay, the loss of water from mesophyll cells. Where are the mesophyll cells present? Below both the upper and lower, between both upper and lower epidermis. Okay, the loss of water from mesophyll cells of the leaves due to transpiration causes increase in osmotic pressure of these cells, right? Their water potential is reduced. Water from xylem is pulled to meet the loss. Okay, a pull or tension is developed in the mesophyll cells and xylem ducts, because of which water flows out. Okay, now coming to transpiration. Okay, transpiration, as we all know, okay, occurs only when it's through the stomata. But there are three types of transpiration based on where it occurs also, not only in the stomata. Okay, all these theories are clear with you all? We are coming to types of transpiration. Okay, the first one we all know, stomatal transpiration. Okay, and this is the major source of loss of water for the plant. Okay, not denying to the fact that 95% of the water that's lost from the plant is from the stomata. There's something known as cuticular transpiration. Okay, and the third thing known as lenticular transpiration. Okay, basically the difference, the process or the mechanism of transpiration doesn't change. What changes is from where the water is lost. Okay, now cuticular transpiration, we all know what cutin is, right? Cutin, outermost, okay, covering on the leaves, okay, mostly it's a wax like substance. Okay, basically meant to reduce the loss of water, right? So cutin is a wax like substance that reduces the loss of water. It forms a thick or thin layer on the epidermis of the leaves. Now the cuticle retards the loss of water, but there is not complete retardation of water, loss of water, as in if this is a leaf, okay, and there is a thick waxy cuticle, okay, some areas where the cuticle is little less, okay, some areas in between, there will be around 8 to 10% of transpiration that will occur from there also. Okay, so this is known as your cuticular transpiration. Okay, only about 8 to 10% of water is lost, as in between the complete, it's not like a uniform layer. Some places, okay, where there is the amount or the layer is little thinner, okay, there water will be lost from that layer. That is your cuticular transpiration. Okay, then is your lenticular transpiration. Stomatal transpiration, I don't think I need to explain it to you all, but still I'll just give a brief. But first let's come to lenticular transpiration. Okay, now lenticels, okay, are fine pores present on the older parts of the plant. Okay, these are present in the bark of old stems, okay, and pericarps of woody fruits. Okay, okay. Now lenticels are pores which are in the older parts of the plant, like woody plants, okay, the bark, okay, or in the pericarp of woody fruits, okay, and only around 0.1 to 1% of water is lost through them. Okay, very less. Okay, stomata 80 to 90%. Okay, fine. Now structure of stomata we all know. Okay, kidney shaped, guard cells. Okay, then these are your surrounding cells. Okay, then remember we studied about the surrounding two cells. Okay, there were 4 types, remember? Okay, so these are your, this whole thing is your stomatal apparatus. This is your stoma. Okay, this is your aperture through which water is lost. Okay, the opening and closing of this is dependent on the potassium ion gradients. Okay, Fine. Loss of potassium ion, this will close. Okay. Now mechanism of opening and closing of stomata. Okay. According to the starch sugar hypothesis, during daytime carbon dioxide is utilized for photosynthesis. Okay. This leads to increase in pH of guard cells, okay, whose normal pH is around 7. Okay. pH of water is also 7. Okay. This, because carbon dioxide is taken, it leads to increase in pH. Okay. This favors conversion of starch to sugar, which is osmotically active. Okay. Thus osmotic concentration of guard cells becomes higher than that of the surrounding cells. Okay. Because in the guard cells your conversion is taking place. Okay. You all are following?
Yes.
Okay. Hence endosmosis occurs and the guard cells become turgid. Okay. Outer walls of the guard cells being thin and elastic get stretched, and inner walls are pulled apart. That's why this is open during daytime. Okay. At night carbon dioxide is not taken in, it accumulates in fact. Okay. Whatever is left, not photosynthesized, not converted, everything that accumulated in guard cells. Okay. Because of which, okay, the carbon dioxide, it mixes up with the water and forms carbonic acid. Carbonic acid reduces the pH of your guard cells to 5. Okay. Getting pH reduced, okay, your cells will, the endosmosis will stop, in fact exosmosis will occur, close, stomata stop, okay, sorry, transpiration stopped. Okay, fine, getting? Now the last part of this chapter. Okay. Okay, one more part I forgot to tell you all. This was about night time. Okay. Now during daytime, when starch is sometimes converted to malic acid, where was malic acid required? Calvin cycle or C4 cycle, where? Where, matlab in Calvin cycle or C4. Okay. Now during daytime starch is converted to malic acid in case of C4 plants. Yeah. Okay. Malic acid dissociates into hydrogen and malate ions. When its work is done, it dissociates into hydrogen and malate ions. Okay. Hydrogen ions, okay, or your H plus ions are given out in the guard cells. Okay. They accumulate in your guard cells. Okay. And sorry, H ions are given out from the guard cells. Okay. And because see, when H ions are released from the guard cells, there is something to subsidize it. So potassium ions enter in. And they remain open. Okay. In the night, reverse occurs. Okay. Water is lost. So basically, potassium, hydrogen, all these three regulate the opening and closing of guard cells. Okay. Now the last part of this chapter, that is significance of transpiration. Why transpiration is required? It helps in translocation of water, otherwise water would not reach. Okay, fine. Then also because of transpiration and because of the transpirational pull, there is absorption and conduction of minerals, because along with water minerals are also passed. Yeah. Okay. Then also because transpiration occurs or because water is continuously lost, turgidity between cells is maintained, shape of the leaf or the turgidity between leaf cells maintained. Okay. Now harmful effects if excessive transpiration occurs. If excessive transpiration occurs or if stomata for some reason remain open longer than they are required to, what will happen? It will eventually cause loss of a lot of water, loss of energy. Okay. Eventually, because loss of sap, so it will become instead of helping to balance, it will become an energy consuming process. Right? It will cause the plant to do more and more work. Okay. And in very high temperatures, it causes desiccation of the plants, because excessive water loss will cause desiccation of the plants. Okay. But this doesn't usually occur. Always nature has its own mechanisms, and or transpiration helps in maintaining mostly.